George is such an authentic person.
Even if he knew he was going to get the short end of the stick, he would still do it because that was the right thing to do.
He's like the most positive man.
George Madsen is a participator.
Aspen quickly captured George Madsen's heart during his first trip here in 1957. That's where he met Martha, who was with her group of visiting nurses eating lunch at the skiers' chalet. It was love at first sight, not just for his first wife, but for Aspen. The couple got to work right away, building not only their home, but the Madsen Chalet, a small lodge at the base of Shadow Mountain that would be home to many locals over the next 4 decades.
We just scratched to come up with enough money to build the first 4 units, which we lived in one, and then we tried to rent part-time, full-time, whatever we could do to keep building. And then we borrowed more money and borrowed more lumber, and then we built the corner of Fifth and Hopkins. It was an add-on project for years and years.
Yeah, it was kind of the original employee housing. I mean, there was a lot of locals who lived there, and
that's true.
Quite a cast of characters came through the Madsen Chalet.
A graduate of Colgate University, Madsen's early career was in sales. But upon his arrival in Aspen, he began to tap into his true passion as a newspaperman and active member of the local media.
George bought the Aspen Flyer from Peggy Clifford in those days for $3,000, and I thought, wow, that's a lot of money.
The Aspen Flyer was a free paper that came out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It was kind of the precursor to the daily paper. And it was very clever, and it was just passed out free around town.
I mean, he wrote the paper, he did the pictures, he laid it out, he printed it, he delivered it.
That took off, and then that sort of evolved to the Aspen Times.
After purchasing the Aspen Flyer from Peggy Clifford, he sold it to Bill Dunaway, who rolled it into the Aspen Times, where Madsen became associate editor and weekly columnist.
He was the editor, Bill Dunaway was the publisher, and George was the only sane one among us. Everybody else was pretty far out.
In his column, On the Other Hand, he documented life around town, including his family's adventures, where it was not uncommon for a recent trip or event to end up as fodder for the paper.
On the Other Hand that was another thing he had to generate a lot of content for.
We could anticipate what the column was going to be about, depending on what happened that week in the family, and we would go, because we knew if we'd been camping or we'd been in an activity when the column came out, it seemed really familiar and corny.
It just seemed to be something that was fit with the community, and it was a friendly thing.
One of Aspen's first true multimedia journalists, George also hosted his own half-hour radio show, Commentary, on KSNO every weekday afternoon.
He would do interviews with some of the real old-timers, and George did such a great job of doing it. He could really, pull the stuff out.
His favorite guest was Miss Louise Berg.
Right.
Oh, really?
She was Aspen's favorite historian.
Right.
And she could answer any question that you could ever come up with about Aspen, and Dad would milk her pretty regularly on that commentary show. It was great.
Well, we're in for a treat today. My guest is Miss Louise Berg. Your father came to Aspen when, Miss Berg?
In the spring of 1880.
They came over Independence Pass, did they?
Came over what was known then as Hunter Pass.
Imagine that was quite a journey, wasn't it?
It was a very difficult journey because there was no road. There was just an animal trail or an Indian trail.
A longtime member of the Rotary Club, George became an events coordinator in his own right, always coming up with new ways to get people into the mountains any way he could think of, by jeep, bike, or on foot.
Well, the Jeep tours were his big thing with the Rotary Club, so that was the Fall Colors tour. And Dad would have a line of Jeeps from here to the airport practically, driving up Smuggler or anywhere else they would go. And we'd tool around the hills, and it just seemed like that line of Jeeps went on forever, and all of a sudden we'd stop somewhere, and they'd jump out and start having a big picnic, and yeah, it was quite the bonanza up there in the hills.
Well, was my favorite.
George's trajectory into politics was a natural one. He not only had a gift with people, he was deeply passionate about the community and its issues.
Somebody said, "Why don't you run for office?" And I did, and I got in. So I really have enjoyed this because of some of the people in it.
During his terms, he was responsible for many projects that were key to the town's infrastructure. George helped with developing the city's 2 largest employee housing projects, funding the new library, building the senior center, expanding the airport, and building a new jail.
The jail was awful. We got a civilized jail now. I'm proud of that.
George's son, Billy Madsen, followed in his father's footsteps, entering local politics, and was recently elected to the Snowmass Town Council.
You know, he was a real influence for me to kind of follow that path, but I probably wouldn't have pursued it if, you know, he hadn't gone down that road before me. Because the first question most people ask is, why would you want to do that? And
My dad wanted to.
My dad did it, so I guess I can do it too.
Skiing was a passion that pervaded many aspects of George's life. From his kids' ski racing and running local events, he volunteered a great deal of his time to the Aspen Ski Club and was best known for his role as starter for many ski races, including the Roach Cup, one of Aspen's first signature ski races.
Standing at the top freezing, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty much the job of the starter. Try not to shiver too much so you don't hit the stopwatch too many times.
You know, he's a volunteer man, and we ended up all being ski racers, so he was out there doing his part.
Wherever the action was, I was.
That's right, busy little person.
George had a tremendous influence on his kids' lives, their goals, and ultimately, their outstanding achievements.
He was a very positive influence on us because he just said, you know, you want to do something, you just go after it and you go get it. So we did. You know, when you have a sister who was the first one to play on the guys' baseball team, you know, I had a brother who climbed Mount Everest, a sister who went to the Olympics.
I wouldn't have been on the US ski team without my dad. One year I had to raise like $100,000 to be on the ski team, or some crazy amount of number, and you did it.
Whatever it took, you know, we needed another pair of skis, well, he'd just figure out how to get those skis for us. And so it was never really an issue. It was just, you know, he was just the great accommodator. He would just figure it out, so he would make it happen for us.
After journalism and politics, George earned a following around town that made him a desirable candidate to run what was then a brand new marketing department for Darcy Brown and the Aspen Ski Company.
All of us in the office read his column, so we knew of George Madsen. And Tom Richardson said, who was our vice president and general manager, said, you know, I think George Madsen would be great for this job that we'd held open for a long time. George had these ideas that they would take a show on the road with Colorado Ski Country or the National Skiers Association, and it was great because he always had something unique each year.
I remember one of the things that I did with him, which was so crazy, is we went down to Denver to promote Aspen as a resort. This is when he was the marketing director of the ski company. And they had a carpet mountain set up in a mall. And I was supposed to ski down this carpet mountain promoting Aspen. I mean, it was just the most bizarre thing. It was really fun, but it was pretty bizarre.
One of George's hallmark achievements as marketing director was the creation of the Snow Hosts program, which was essentially the first ever on-mountain concierge service. Through this program, George not only improved the visitor experience, but changed the way locals view guests to this day.
When the guests come to town, you ought to be treated as guests.
For a long time, it wasn't cool to even welcome tourists. In fact, we called them turkeys in the old days. And Dad had a campaign during the ski company, turkeys are our bread and butter, trying to let the local people know that this town wouldn't be much of a town without the turkeys.
We could look out over Ruby Park and watch guests trying to load their skis onto buses, and it was these old gray line buses that were just nasty. And it was really watching them go through the effort. And George said, we need someone to be helping guests with their skis, to be, giving free wine and cheese parties on the mountain. We got lots of longtime locals to come and be a part of the program. And it was all George's brainchild.
I'd like to do it. And I thought some other people might like it too. They did.
With the community always on the forefront of his mind, George bridged the gap between the Aspen Skiing Company and the locals by pioneering the Community Pass program.
One of the first things that he recommended was a community service pass program. And that was a wonderful idea. The rules were that you needed to give at least 100 volunteer hours a year to any one of a number of nonprofit organizations in the community. By doing that, we were really engaging more and more people who felt very much more generously toward the company than people had in the past.
George continued his association with the Aspen Skiing Company by working as a ski instructor. He also went back into his journalistic instincts and wrote a book, Old Geezers Can Learn to Ski. During his so-called retirement, George spent most of his time spearheading outdoor adventures for seniors. With his second wife, Connie, by his side, the couple led dozens of hut trips, bicycle tours, hiking, and camping trips. George Madsen's legacy is defined by the virtues with which he lived his life: family, community, and the love for Aspen.
He came out here to develop a quality of life and contributing in a way that mattered locally. Community was everything to him, and preserving a really positive community was important to him. Whatever he could do to contribute to that idea, he was very devoted to.
George was pretty much the voice of the community.
That's true.